Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help make sense of what they mean, and hopefully we talk about ways that help you and what you might do about them. Joining me today is Don Berman. I first met Don, 2006, 2007. We were doing HR technology in two different organizations. Don had spent his career focused on the adoption of HR and talent management applications and technology-driven best practices on a global basis. And he was working on an exciting topic called job descriptions. He co-founded JDXpert, leading talent management towards a more job description-centric model. And today he leads the company's sales, marketing, and partner efforts, and is also the chief evangelist and resident JD expert. I love that. Welcome, Don.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, all I can say is, Teri, it's good to chat. I mean, I think when we first met, I think my hair was still brown, actually, but I don't have much
Mine
of
too.
But no, I mean, it's been great connecting over the years, and I think I love the stuff that you guys are doing at Sapient. It's so
Great.
impactful.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I wanted to cover a topic that, well, it's pretty basic for many people that will be listening to this podcast. I mean, it really sets the foundation for jobs in an organization. I don't groan because, we've all written them, and probably for the most part, hated doing it. I mean, there's some people that are really good at this and they love it. But I would say most of the people I ever worked with were like, write job description. Copying and pasting and back and forth, and getting agreement on it, only to realize after your first interview, you've left something important out, right?
If you admit to like writing job descriptions, people will look at you like you have a mental disorder. It's just really kind of how it works. Job descriptions have really just, they're super important, but people just kind of stick their head in the sand and just kind of ignore them and hope they'll go away.
Yeah.
In the last 3 or 4 years, people have really kind of come to grips with the fact that if I don't attack this, if I don't fix this problem, it's going to fix me. And so it's gotten, the attitude towards job description has improved quite a bit over the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. So it's amazing the number of organizations that are in large part still doing a lot of this stuff manually. So I want to talk about just sort of in general what's happening in this space and
Sure.
how important they are and ways that we might simplify that process. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
Absolutely.
All right, then let's get into the huddle. So I've heard you talk about or refer to job descriptions as this sort of living, breathing resource, right? It's not just this paper floating around the office or a document on somebody's hard drive that ends up getting lost. Tell us what you mean by that, and maybe at the same time sort of talk about the importance of the job description, because I think in some regards, until you really need one or until things go sideways, people don't realize how important the job description is to the process and to the organization.
Yeah, I mean, totally. It's job descriptions are really a foundational element. I mean, whether you're talking about hiring people or evaluating them, dealing with that whole talent management thing, or you're talking about compliance or compensation or any type of training or succession management, in order to do any of that, you really need a clear understanding of the work that people do as evidenced by a job description. And the thought of trying to do those sort of things and pay equity audits and that sort of thing without a clear understanding of the work that people do is just, it just is a non-starter. And as far as like job descriptions floating around, that's like really a nightmare when you think about it. Because if people are just pulling job descriptions out of their hard drive and making changes willy-nilly, you've lost any kind of governance. And it's a really bad thing, because in order to effectively recruit, retain, and evaluate talent, at the very least, you need to be really describing the work that people do in a very consistent manner throughout your organization. And when you talk about living and breathing, jobs change all the time. Technology changes, the organization changes. And, just look at what's going on with AI now. I mean, my gosh, I think jobs are going to disappear and others are going to change dramatically. And I think a great example of this, is the whole remote work trend we saw during the pandemic. I mean, jobs needed to be reevaluated in context of remote work, and to make sure that the work actually got done, despite the fact that there were some items that couldn't be done remotely and had to be reshuffled to other resources. Yeah, and for compliance as well. I mean, you're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act and describing the physical demands and working conditions for a job, and somebody's now in a completely different location doing different tasks. The bottom line is jobs should be reviewed every time you post them, or at the very least annually.
Yeah, it's not a set it and forget it exercise. And, I remember the first time being asked to write a job description, the first thing I did was I went to the internet and looked up as many different job descriptions along that same lines as I could to try to figure out what the heck I would say in this job description. But I think the importance of getting something out there from the start that makes sense to even attract people to the organization, not to mention then to evaluate the work that they do and retain them in the organization is critical. I think people, look at that as kind of a badge, right? This is what I do. This is who I am for this organization.
Oh, yeah. It's, job descriptions done right and used properly can be super effective in making an organization effective at everything they do, because it is actually at the lowest level, it represents the work that's done, right? So if you don't have a handle on the work that's done, everything from productivity to turnover, everything's at stake.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, there's been a lot of turbulence over the last couple of years, right? And even now heading into the economic downturn, right? People getting laid off and reductions in force. So not only are people losing their jobs, but the people that are left behind are trying to figure out who's going to do what and where we don't have people to, get certain jobs done. So I think that's a critical issue that I think people are trying to figure out. Well, how are we going to navigate this? And is it, what do we do with respect to the jobs? Are we rewriting them again?
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of the economic downturn and the labor shortage, all the stuff that's going on now, is that what you're asking?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess my question would be, how much time do you have? I mean, this is this is just huge what's going on here. So back, in the fall, I was able to see at a conference I was at, Marcy Russell from CNBC, she's their chief economist, he presented. And I found it really interesting, and it really stuck with me because she said there are three really, really big problems that we have, or three problems, let's say. One is inflation, the other is supply chain, and the last is a labor shortage. She said that inflation was going to be relatively short term. And we can actually see those numbers ticking down in general. That supply chain, that's really gotten a lot better too. I mean, there's still wrinkles in it, but you're not going to the supermarket and seeing these giant, all these shelves empty and that sort of thing. And you order something from Amazon, it generally shows up, when it's supposed to. And that was kind of a medium term problem. But the labor shortage, according to her, and I think this is borne out by our experience in the industry, that's our big long-term problem. And, in the webinars I've been doing, I really feel like I'm an economist. I'm, quoting stats and stuff all the time about, this and that. But, the one stat that I think people need to remember, and this is, currently right now, there were over 11 million job openings and fewer than 6 million applicants for them. And when I say applicants for them, it doesn't count if you're already in the labor force, because you would just be going from one job to another, so net zero. But there aren't enough people coming into the labor force to cover the jobs by about 6 million. So I mean, it's when you try and find people and you talk to find applicants and you talk to recruiters and they talk about these open positions that are just sticking around forever. Like 50% of companies have open positions. It's really a big problem. And now, so we're coming into an area where we have all of this, this labor shortage and big problem filling these positions. And now we're coming into an economic downturn. And that's really, I'm not going to be the economist in the room here, but, compared to what a classic recession is, we're not really seeing a lot of those statistics match up. But just to give you an indication, in one of our recent webinars we just did in December, the ratio was 3-to-1 for webinar attendees who were more worried about the labor market than were worried about the recession. The numbers were pretty impressive, pretty staggering, really. So companies are sitting around with all these open positions and now being asked to do layoffs when they know that on the other end of this thing, whatever this recession turns out to be, they're not going to be able to refill these positions. It's a really tough spot.
Yeah, right. I mean, once there's that period of time, right, where you've, just cut a whole section of workers or a whole department, whatever else, and basically can't rehire into that same position for a certain period of time. So they've got to figure something else out. It's not like there's a whole team of people sitting around the organization writing job descriptions, though, right? They're pulled into this process because they're looking for new talent. They're trying to fill a job, create a job. Talk a little bit about that process and maybe the people that you've worked with, and do you get people excited about writing job descriptions?
So when we go to trade shows, we have this little button that says, "I love my job descriptions," and people generally. It's a big hit at the trade shows. People put them on, and generally they're worn ironically because everyone hates their job descriptions. But people really now understand that again, it's such a foundational element that unless you tackle it and do it properly, you're not going to be able to do anything else effectively. How can you recruit for the right person, the right type of person, when you have 15 versions of a job description floating around? It's just, the risk is really extensive. And when you go ahead and hire somebody and then you're not holding on to that person because they don't, the job description doesn't actually match what they're going to be doing, and then you have to go repost that job. I mean, the cost of that, with both the hard costs and the soft costs, the lack of productivity and how people feel about having to cover open positions and how it affects the culture of your company. I mean, it's really, put yourself in a really big bind because it's not going to be easy to replace those people. Then you have to go back out to the well and try it again.
Right.
But, in general, most of the people that we deal with are compensation folks. And I'm not really sure why. I mean, job descriptions are very important. You're very important in recruiting for sure. I mean, I don't know if you went to HR tech, but I felt like they should have named it, recruiting tech or something. I mean, it was all recruiting and recruiting tools and all that sort of stuff. But in general, a lot of times comp people end up holding the bucket, I should say, when it comes to job descriptions.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways they have the most to gain and the most to lose, because if you don't have an effective compensation strategy, especially in this labor market, you won't get any applicants. I mean, so it really ends up that comp people are really the people we deal with most often.
Yeah. And now we're back to how you and I met, which was I was doing comp and you were doing job descriptions.
That's right.
And that's exactly my experience is, they're the ones that have to price the jobs, right? So in order to price the jobs, they've got to define what the job does. And, oftentimes that comes from the department head, the hiring manager, et cetera. But they're just giving kind of the high level outline, right? Comp ends up writing the details and putting it into such a format that they can actually match it to other data in the market.
Yeah. So, that whole thing has become a bit of a mess as well, because first of all, the job market is so hot. You have few applicants for each position, that the applicant is really in the driver's seat. And people have had to really, kind of shift gears and look at real-time data for job postings to understand what positions are actually being paid now. And the other thing that's really affecting that is this whole this pay transparency issue that's going on. You had, I think, New York and Colorado, and I think there's 6 or so states that are requiring, having good faith job salary ranges on job postings.
Right.
That just is like, now you're talking about, you have all these companies that have really focused on market pricing and, the localization of pay and all of that sort of thing. Well, now, you can have, combine that with the remote work situation where you have somebody who's signed up, who's working for a company in San Francisco, but they're living in Nebraska. How does that all work? So, people are doing things like moving to national ranges because of, remote work and pay transparency. So, people are really struggling because there's not enough people to fill those roles. And you see things like there was return to the office. Well, I don't know, some people are returning to the office. Other people are just, well, hey, if I have to go back to the office, then I'm just going to go get another job. I like working from home. So there's so much pressure in so many different ways trying to get these positions filled, and compensating them is more complicated than it's ever been. And again, at the foundation is, what is that person doing? Understanding that work. And that's where the job description fits in.
Yeah. So AI is all the rage right now. And I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask you your thoughts about it, especially, I don't know if you've done any work with ChatGPT yet, but, thinking about this as it relates to job descriptions, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing on that front? And maybe what organizations need to be thinking about to make sure they're on the right path with this AI concept for any of these types of things, but job descriptions in particular strike me as an easy, low-hanging fruit, right?
Oh, yeah. So first of all, we've been working in AI for many years, but, using tools, but like something a little, I guess, the early generations of what we're seeing now, more like natural language processing, like basically creating content. We had some functionality that pulled content from the web and, figured out, which were verbs and how to create order from chaos, and cleaned up a lot of that content. So we've been processing applying AI to processing job content for some time. But this is a different story. This is generative AI, and job descriptions are really there are different software tools that do different things. But since we generate and manage job descriptions, generative AI is absolutely part of the mix. And, as a ChatGPT in particular, I've been following since the day it came out. And as someone who writes a lot of content in general, beyond just job descriptions, it is the ultimate productivity tool. And it is great for creating drafts of things. Are you going to be able to, print off what you get from ChatGPT? No, but it can save you a ton of time, and often will put together coherent text that you could use as drafts and get to a final form in a much less time. As far as job descriptions, it's a pretty good data source for posting data. When I say posting data, you're talking about a job summary, the essential functions, and the qualifications, pretty much what posting data is. A lot of our enterprise clients go way deeper into compliance information, physical demands and working conditions, competencies, interview questions. And there's a lot of content that ChatGPT can generate if you ask it properly. So you can kind of coax competencies and skills from them as well. But it is definitely a tool. But it really doesn't do anything, with your governance issues or a lot of the other issues we talked about already. It's content, and content is critically important when it comes to writing job descriptions, because, if you give somebody a blank page and say, here, fill out your job description, the compliance just goes way, way down, because people first, they don't like to write, and if you give somebody a job description that's 90% wrong, they'll revise it in a heartbeat. But if you ask them to invent it, they won't. So content is really, really important. We've really been investing in that for a very long time, and we write and curate our own content as well as provide crowdsourced content from our that's also curated from our customers. And we view ChatGPT in that same vein as another data source. And we work with a lot of those the consulting companies that you're very familiar with. We provide their content as a data source as well. And ChatGPT is really just going to be another data source. And we're going to be including that as a data source actually this year already, ChatGPT specifically. And later we'll be using it to do things like optimize postings to get a particular type of applicant. And potentially, I guess the end goal of what we're looking at doing, and this is still well on the drawing board, is loading a large language model with our own content, because we have really millions of data points of job description content. It would be great if we could, load our content into a large language model and fish it out, the same way you see ChatGPT doing.
Yeah. There's absolutely no reason to write a job description from scratch anymore, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, we provide so much content with even just a title. You can get a draft that you could pick and then start from there and then apply content to it as you go.
Yeah.
So, and that's the way most people go about it. I mean, and even in the old days, I guess, when it was, I forgot the name, what we used to call it, but PDQs, position description questionnaires, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what we used to do is we used to fill them out, provide them with content, because if you give them a blank page, I'm telling you, people do not like to write. They'd much rather revise something than to write something from scratch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it also, I think, as you mentioned, from a comp perspective, things have evolved quite significantly, because now it's really much better to look at what is the going market for some of these jobs in real time in these massive databases of job openings and job offerings versus, looking at data that's a year old, that was part of a survey, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's really, it's just about worthless. I mean, it's data that's a year old now. I mean, so, and there's a lot of interesting real-time data. And I'm not going to comment on which one is better than another, but, you have to be looking at the job market in real time. I mean, it's so competitive. Not only the job market, but the positions you're kind of trying to fill, but, for retaining the people that you have. I mean, people are not stupid. They see what's out there, and, it's very easy to put your foot in the water and see what's out there. And, people will find great salaries out there. So you have to be able to compete.
Yeah. What do you see any new and up and coming sort of job titles coming down the road? I mean, obviously, with a lot of the changes from an AI perspective and, some of the other work remote, those types of things. Do you see any new job descriptions, job titles that are being developed as a result?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I from time to time, I look around. We have one of our content writers. We get together like once a month and we talk about what jobs they should be looking for. And every now and then, I'm just cruising around and I saw some stuff on Multiplier, which I thought was really interesting. That things like chief automation officer. So I think you could be seeing that. Gamification marketing specialist, virtual reality programmer. And, I think things like digital reputation defender. These are titles you probably didn't heard of, but one of the most interesting ones that really got my attention was human machine matchmaker, which is basically, well, yeah, it's not quite like how it sounds. It's a position that is really revolves around, the human and robotic interface, and having humans and machines work together on projects and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Those are some interesting ones. I remember when Chief People Officer and some of those first started being bandied about, but these are much more interesting. Human machine matchmaker. I love that. I'm going to be on the lookout for that one.
Yeah, I think I want to apply for that job. It sounds like fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Any fun, interesting stories or case studies or things that you've done or experienced in your career as it relates to this topic that people might be able to relate to?
Oh, gosh.
Too many to count?
No, probably. But, so we've always been a remote company. I mean, when my partner and I started it, and it was two guys in the garage in different states, but the remote work thing has gotten a lot of people using Zoom on a more regular basis than they ever did, or in different places than they ever did. So you get those sort of oversharing things that happen that can be pretty comical, but so that sort of thing happens all the time. And then we always have our set of crazy clients. I mean, just actually last week I was talking to one of our CSMs, and she said that one of our international clients was like, they were frustrated that they weren't getting their emails answered over the weekend, and had actually asked the CSM to install WhatsApp so that they could be communicating all through Saturday and Sunday. So that's craziness. But the other thing is not a really funny story, but kind of a trend. It's like, so, and I think you'll identify with this as someone who's, been around a while. Technology has just improved in such leaps and bounds that people are starting to have like unrealistic expectations, unrealistic, I should say.
Right.
And, when you go ahead and you show your product and all these great advantages you have, and you have one person who's going, this is amazing, and you have another person going, well, I mean, can't it just write the job description for us? I mean, do we have to do anything at all? And it's like, it's your job and your company. You really need to kind of apply some rigor to that. So that's happened more often than I care to admit. But I do have one story from our deep, dark startup past, and that thought was pretty entertaining. So it was with a very large clothing retailer, and this was before single sign-on, and they wanted to like auto-generate passwords. So we auto-generated passwords for 10,000 people. And what we did is we combined random words just from a couple of different lists. Well, we did it over the weekend, and on Monday we get these panicked phone calls that some of these combinations of words were off color, and they were freaking out, and so we had to go kind of randomize all this stuff and regenerate the passwords. But that was pretty funny.
Throw numbers in the middle somewhere.
Yeah,
I can imagine just combining thousands of words 10,000 times. What you could come up with, you might write Shakespeare.
I can tell you some of it was not Shakespeare, and it was, at the time it wasn't funny, but in retrospect it was very funny. But
everything's funny in hindsight, right? And
exactly.
In terms of a lot of these crazy things that happen in the course of your career, that sometimes they're just you're running around with just about to pull your hair out trying to solve problems, and then, a few years later, you're like, that was the funnest, craziest time ever, right?
Right, exactly. It's at the time, your hair is falling out, but, that's okay. In retrospect. No, but it is. I think that, and, being like kind of a startup person, it's, those are always, that whole bootstrap phase of an organization is usually, you always remembered fondly as fun, but I think if you were stuck back into it, you'd probably say, wow, that was a lot of work.
Yeah. It was a lot more fun in hindsight than it was in experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So any, I guess, advice or guidance you might give to people who are new to the world of job descriptions, or even have been around the block on this topic and maybe haven't, really been thinking outside the proverbial box?
Yeah. So the thing about job descriptions is that, a lot of times when you're in a software business and you're providing solutions, the solutions can be very, nuanced and different from client to client. And we do have that to a degree. But the thing that's really really amazing about job descriptions is everybody's doing the same stuff wrong. I mean, you'll come to these organizations with 60,000 employees that have their job descriptions on Word documents on a share drive at best, or other companies you'll basically say, well, when was the last time you updated your job descriptions? And they'll say, I'm embarrassed to tell you. I mean, it's almost like, when you start to talk to people about their job descriptions, they kind of stare at their feet and shuffle and kind of, hey, how's the weather? They really don't want to change the subject on you. But in general, people are doing the same things wrong. I mean, first of all, this is why I think our solution has been so successful. So first of all, it provides structure, right? So most people will have job descriptions, different areas in different parts of the company may have different formats for their job descriptions and be capturing different data. And that's kind of a definite no-no. So by providing a standard structure, we provide the structure, obviously, but also going through that exercise of understanding what you have and what you're capturing and how it affects compliance and how it affects recruiting. That alone, that mental exercise has tremendous benefit. And then we provide a structure to handle all of that information, and you have everything. You have really a database of information as opposed to just random information all over the place. And the other thing is, like I said before, governance, right? If people can just, pull down a job description from their hard drive, make changes and send it out, and that becomes the new reality, you in compensation and recruiting have lost all control because it's just the wild, wild west. So governance is really a critical piece. And the workflow that we provide really gets that under control. And by having a repository that has all these useful functions in it, people will go there to get the information because it's the easiest way. And the other thing that really has been a game changer, and I mentioned this before, is content. I mean, people do not like to write. They really don't. And if you give content sources, even the way we do it is you can go ahead and pull down a job description, which you can use as a base, and then fix it up to meet your needs. But also you can apply content to each piece. When you look at the summary, you can pull content in, and again, it just makes it. First of all, it makes the output way better because they're pulling it from curated content, but it also makes the compliance with your process get it done. It goes through the roof because it's much easier to do, and people aren't so resentful of having to do it because, as we said, people love job descriptions. And I think the real win here is that if you go ahead and do all these things, that at the end of the day, you can integrate that information across the enterprise. I mean, your recruiting application needs accurate and up-to-date job descriptions. Your HR system, of course, does. Your compensation system, your performance management system, all of these things benefit from accurate and up-to-date job descriptions. And having it in that structured format and being able to share it via API is just really a super big win.
Yeah. So in other words, get help.
Right.
If you need to write job descriptions, help is available in a lot of different ways, but there's technology, there's ChatGPT, there's all sorts of access to things out there. So don't go it alone.
Absolutely. I think that, we used to have people that say, well, why don't you give us your job descriptions? Because that's one of the things we do is we take your job descriptions and we put it in for you.
Right.
Well, no, I want to work on them first. I think, no, you don't understand. You want to use the power tools. You don't want to be chipping away at a giant tree with a nail file. That's not what you want to do.
Yeah. That idea. Go ahead and just put out there what you've got, right? And then start working on it because, that's a nightmare.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's the way to do it.
Well, this was fun. You and I always have fun when we talk about this particular topic. And I really want to thank you, Don, for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. Where can people find you online and on social?
Of course, on LinkedIn. And, one of the things that Ashley wants me to do, so of course I'll do it. We were just talking about our marketing director, Ashley Johnston, because I do what she tells me to do. Is establish more of a presence on LinkedIn. So I'm going to be doing that. You can find us at JDXpert.com. There's all kinds of information about us and what we do. And,
awesome.
Just reach out. We'd love to chat with you.
Very good. Well, I want to thank our producer, the Brand Method Media Group. I'll thank our marketing team, Lisa and Zoe, who will listen to this for me and come up with a great title. And I want to thank you for tuning in. That's all we have for today's episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast. Leave us a review if you have a minute. We'd love to hear from you. You can also drop us a line or schedule a chat on the website. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And Teri, great connecting with you again.
You too, Don. Bye.